On evaluating payer reimbursements. I'm Karen Joba from the InfoDive support team, and I'm going to be presenting this afternoon. If you have any questions during the webinar today, please let us know by clicking the triangle next to the questions in the GoToWebinar window. Enter your question and press send, and then we'll answer your questions at the end of the webinar. So please don't be shy. Go ahead and enter your questions. Also, if you would please rate our webinar when we are done today, we would appreciate that. We're always looking for ideas for future webinars. So let us know what you guys are all working on and how we can help. Now, as I mentioned, we're going to be reviewing the InfoDive reports that will help you evaluate payer reimbursement. So let's go ahead and get started. We always start with our normal disclaimer that we present data solely for informational purposes, and we encourage you to consult your own resources, and we always use blinded data in any reports that we share with you all. So here's today's agenda. We're going to start with reviewing your charge master, which is going to be the first step in evaluating contracts because this provides something to measure all of the insurance contracts against. And then the second step is going to be to determine the volume of revenue and patients by payer because you're going to want to focus on your top volume payers. Then we'll look at some reports to compare reimbursement to the Medicare allowable. And when you're comparing payers to just one metric like the Medicare allowable, then you can easily identify payers where the rates are going to be below what you consider acceptable levels. We'll also take a quick look at the zero paid report so you can monitor your write-offs. And then lastly, we'll look at the rate simulator to see the financial impact of any changes to a contract. So let's start with the charge master and let's talk about this. I think most of us keep an eye on our charge masters each year, but this year in particular is a really good time to take a look at your charge master in detail because there were a lot of changes in work RVUs and practice expense RVUs, and then the conversion factor went up. So many of those Medicare allowables are going to increase if that proposed rule becomes final, and we'll know usually at the end of November whether the proposed rule becomes final or not. But this is a good year to really dig in on your charge master. Lots of philosophies when it comes to setting a charge master, but it really all starts with checking what's your current percent of collections on your charges. You know, you want to make sure you're billing at least your highest contracted rate across all the billable codes so you aren't leaving any money on the table. Excuse me, and the financial key metrics and the reimbursement by CPT class reports, those are going to let you review those rates really quickly. And then once you have that information, you can go set your pricing strategy. Now, again, many philosophies, some practices are going to set their fees at 200 to 300% of Medicare, and some are going to set their fees lower because they don't want to feel like their AR is overstated. And you also may want to consider factors like markets, like your market and what's the competitor pricing. And so it's important to know that you aren't going to be leaving any money on the table. And just remember, you can always get your estimated collectible based on your Medicare fees on your dashboard. So you're always going to have an idea of what your minimum collectible is at all times. Again, we don't think there's a right or a wrong philosophy, but our goal is just to show you the reports to help determine what your charges are, regardless of what your philosophy is. All right, so these are the reports in InfoDive that you can use to evaluate your payer contracts. And I've listed the basics of each report so you have a reference, and we'll do our best to get to all of these reports, but I have screenshots of them as well on the next slides, just so you have a portal path. And then just as a reminder, you can always access the slides for any of our webinars under the support tab and under that webinar section. So we'll start with the financial key metrics. This is your payer mix report, and this is a great place to start when it comes to evaluating payers. This report's going to default to the recent 12 months, and it's going to sort in the order of the highest charges, so you can see your top payers by volume. You're also going to have your percentage of Medicare that you're collecting to see how well you're being reimbursed, and then you can also sort on that column. And then you can see your percentage of collection on charges, as well as the percentage of charges that are paid at full charge and zero paid charges. This report has filters, and one of those filters is the payer class, which I think is really helpful. You can filter on that payer class and then compare just your commercial payers to one another, and that's what we'll do when we get over to the portal. You can also compare just your Medicare Advantage payers to one another. Now, this report is part of your key report packet that gets generated every month, but it's also the first report in your key report packet for the webinar today. This next report is the CPT summary, and this is the second report in your key report packet today. Now, Once you identify the payers that you want to evaluate, you can come here and you can filter on that payer. And then I like to sort on the charges to get the top codes first. And you can quickly see if there's a code that stands out as being reimbursed lower than the majority of the codes. You can also see charges that are zero paid by the CPT code on this report. And if you find a particularly troubling code, then you can go to that zero paid claims report and you can really dig into all those details. And then along those same lines, I would go to this next report, which is going to be the reimbursement by CPT class. This report also is going to default to the recent 12 months, and it's going to default to financial class. And so there's two ways I would use this report. The first is just reviewing the defaults to compare the financial classes and then just identify any problem areas. For example, you can see this practice is getting reimbursed for E&M codes 144% of Medicare for United Healthcare, but only 105% by Aetna. So that's a pretty significant difference for two commercial plans. So I would check my Aetna contract and see if we're being paid according to contract. And then indeed, if that is the case, I'd ask for a meeting to kind of renegotiate those rates and get them a little bit higher. Now you can also see they are the lowest of the commercial plans for the E&M categories. So the second way I would use this report is to go filter on that financial class of Aetna and then flip that first column to the payer primary, because maybe there's some particular Aetna plan that's causing that overall percentage to be lower. You know, maybe there's an HMO plan that you're reimbursed at lower than your PPO plan, and that's causing that, you know, that total number to be lower. Now, this report is going to be your third report in your key report packet today. Now, this report is the payment statistics by payer, and this is going to let you compare a specific CPT code by payer. You can also see there's actually 5 different reports under this tab, and you can see there's the CPT class, the payer detail, and then the allowed amount detail. And we'll dive into these reports when we get over to the portal, but this is the 4th report in your key report packet today. This last screenshot is the rate change simulator report, and this is a great way to compare 2 different commercial plans. For example, you could enter the specifics of your Aetna in year 1 category and your Cigna in year 2, and then you can compare their reimbursement rates by CPT code. Now, you could also use this report to see how a change in a contract would impact the practice based on the actual number of services that have been done in the recent 12 months. So this report has multiple uses that I find to be really helpful, and I hope you will. And then the last report is going to be the service to payment post lag report. And we're actually going to use the charge to payment post lag report, but this still gives you a screenshot. But this is also really helpful when you're negotiating, because most contracts are going to say that they're going to pay a submitted clean claim in 30 days. So that report's going to allow you to actually see how long it's taking payers to pay. Now, obviously, if you're delayed in posting payments and due to staffing issues or whatever, you have to take that into consideration when you're using any of these lag reports as well. All right, let's head over to the portal. And we are going to be in a blinded urology account today. And we'll start with that financial key metrics report underneath the finance tab. And so this is going to default, by the way, it's going to default to the recent 12 months, and it's going to default to everyone. But and you're going to see overall, you know, what the percentage of Medicare is, and it's 96.6%. But because we're just going to focus on accounts that we can, and plans that we can try to renegotiate, we're going to just filter on the payer class of commercial, because I want to see those particular plans. So I can see here that my top payer is going to be Meritan. And on Meritan, I'm getting reimbursed 101% of Medicare. United Healthcare is my second top plan, and I'm getting 119% of Medicare. So that's a significant difference, right? So we may definitely want to dig further into this Meritan. I can also see that my third highest payer, I'm getting less than Medicare. That's a 98.8%. I don't know if that's some sort of you know, if that's like a Medicaid plan or some sort of special plan, but that's also a plan that I might take a look at. That's a pretty low percentage. You know, Cigna, I'm getting 115%. Kaiser, I'm getting 91%. So, that's really low. But, when you're looking at these plans, you also want to take into consideration that, Kaiser is known to be a tough plan to negotiate with. So you'd have to weigh how much time does it take to gather all the information I'm going to need to go for a better contract with. Are you really going to be successful? And so one of the things that you'd want to consider when you're looking at that is, how many lives are you actually covering under those plans? If I decided I didn't want to take Kaiser anymore, how many lives would I be covering, or how many patients would I possibly be losing? And a quick way to do that is to come up under this productivity tab and go look at this productivity summary. And again, we're looking at the recent 12 months. It defaults to provider, but I was already in here, so I already sorted on payer primary and sorted on my patients. So I could see that, okay, well, I've got 325 lives, unique patients that are actually coming to our practice that are on Kaiser. So you'd have to take into consideration that as well. Lone Star also had that low rate. They only have 200 lives. So just a quick way to know that if you're going to drop a plan because the reimbursement rate's really low, or you're going to try to renegotiate, to come in here to see, well, how many people are you actually impacting? So this again is under that productivity summary. So let's go see though, I think the Meritan is definitely worth taking a look at. So let's see if we can find some data to back up how we could go and renegotiate that contract. So I'm going to go back to this finance tab, and I'm going to come over to the CPT summary. So before we dig into the Meritan, I want to show you another way I would use this report. We talked about on the charge master making sure that you are not billing too low. And one of the ways to do that, and you can see here, this is going to default to CPT with description. And like most of our plans, you can sort on any of these columns. So I'm going to actually left click on here because I want to see, am I getting my charges paid, my charges as a percent of Medicare? Are there any that are really too low? And so I can see here, there's going to be a couple of codes that don't have any Medicare allowable, but like I can come down and I can take a look here and I can see here my charges are only 80% of what the Medicare allowable is. And that's something that, if you are charging $50 and the Medicare allowable is $62, then you are not going to get $62, right? No one's going to pay you more than you actually billed. So let's filter. I'm going to filter on the commercial class here just to get a little better idea. But what I would do when I look at this, is if I would say, okay, if I want my fee schedule to be 200% of Medicare, then I would come and I would take a look at any one of my plans where my fees were not 200% of Medicare, and I would go and I would adjust those fee schedules. So even if you're only leaving a little bit of money on the table, every little bit adds up these days. So now let's go in and let's take a look at, oh, I was on Meritan already. I apologize, you guys. I just want to show you that. I'm going to go back to everyone because I thought there were more codes than that were paid less than the Medicare rate. So even like, well, you can just see like this pessary, it's only 8 units. But anyway, you understand the point. So I apologize, I got a little sidetracked there. Let's go back and let's take a look at Meritan because we want to find out where we can get reimbursed better. So I'm going to just nail this down a little bit more. I want to look at the eval and management codes for this particular plan. And I'm going to sort on the units. But you see how I see all of these red dots? That's telling me right away that on all of my eval and management codes, I'm getting paid less than 100% of Medicare from this commercial plan. And as I look across here, I can see on average I'm getting paid $109 per unit, and the Medicare fee is $113 per unit. A couple other things though that I would pay attention to on this report is looking at the percentage of charges that were zero paid, but also looking at the percentage of payments that are coming from my patients. I mean, 30%, I feel like it's a pretty high percentage of payments coming from patients. So one of the things you want to make sure of is that you are collecting that coinsurance and those copays before you go and start, really trying to renegotiate. Because if you aren't collecting that, then that's impacting your paid percent of Medicare. that's something that you're going to want to pay attention to. One way to check real quick is you see how I have this diagonal, that means I can dive. If I left click on here and I dive into this code, I'm sorry, I'm going to pick a status of closed up here. Let me just go back and click that. I'm going to pick a status of closed because I want to see on my closed claims what's happening, right? Why am I getting that low percentage? And when this comes up, what you're going to see is there are a handful of codes that you're getting no payments on, that they've been completely written off. But as I come over here and I see the payments per unit, there's also some of here, like look, like this one, you got the copay from the patient, it looks like, but you didn't get any payments from the insurance and everything got written off. And then as I scroll through here, I could see, like this 7712, a lot of this looks like this is maybe the contracted, what you're getting paid most. So either that contracted rate is too low, or else your payments from your patients and your copays, et cetera, maybe are not getting collected as they should be. So this is a good place to dive in quickly and get some detail for that. The next place I would want to go take a look, now that I know that, is I want to go over and want to look at the CPT, the reimbursement by CPT class, because it makes me wonder, am I just getting reimbursed poorly on my E&M categories, or am I getting reimbursed poorly on all my CPT classes? Now this report, when this comes up, this is going to default to financial classes, and I'm going to go ahead and filter on commercial, because this is a good place to start and compare all your different plans before we dive in deep. And I'm going to just flip this to payer primary. And so I can see here that, a lot of times, what they do is they'll say, okay, well, we'll pay you a little bit. We're going to pay you higher on your surgery codes because you're considered a surgical practice. We'll pay you a little bit less on your E&M codes, but the reimbursement on surgery codes is going to make up for it. And that is possible sometimes, but like if you look here, like they're paying 105% Meritan is on their surgery codes and only 96% on their E&M codes, but they've got more volume in the E&M than they do their surgery codes. If you look over, and so it really drives their overall rate down. If you look over at United Healthcare, they have that, hey, we'll give you 133%, and it's probably, 135% or whatever of Medicare, but we're going to pay you a little bit less on your E&M codes, but it's going to balance out because you're still going to get your overall, you're getting like that 119%. So this is a good way, though, to look and see when you're going to go negotiate, to go and say, okay, well, you guys are giving us 105% of our surgery codes. We'd like to bump that up to, even if you bump that up to 110%, and then you say you got to give me 105% on my E&M codes, that would make a big difference. All right, so next let's go over and we're going to look at our payment statistics report. So here again, we have these 5 reports. So when I say 5 reports under this one tab, you have this 5 different reports as ways that you can look at these, at this data. Now this is gonna default to the CPT class of eval and management codes. And I went in and changed, it defaults to like 6 months, but because we've been looking at everything for recent 12, I went in and I changed this to the recent 12 months. So I've got October through September. And this is going to default, it's in CPT code order. And so what I would do, one of the ways I might use this report is take it out to Excel, and you could eliminate a lot of these columns that maybe you don't need, but I would at least have my Medicare allowable all in one place. And I'd also have like, what's my paid mode in one place as well. So just to let you know, the difference between a paid mode is going to be what you're paid the most often versus the paid average is what you've paid divided by all of the services that you've received. So that can get a little confusing, but if you ever get confused by that, we have the report definitions down here that you could bring up and go and take a look at that. But that's one of the ways that I would use this report is see, and you could do that for every single CPT class, right? So you'll have in one quick place, hey, here's what most payers are paying me, And then here's what the Medicare allowable is. So that's helpful information to have. But let's come over and we could take a look at Meritan. So if we come over here and we say, we find Meritan and we filter on them. And one thing about this report, so you're going to notice right away that, that their percentage of Medicare is going up, right? It's higher. I'm going to go ahead and sort on units, get our codes at the top. And so you can see here that where we were getting less than 100%. So now you might be thinking, well, gosh, you're actually getting more than 100% on quite a few of these codes now. That's because the payment statistics report, it does not include any zero paid claims. So overall, those zero pays are important, but in this report, we're looking to see, okay, when you are paid, what are you paid, and how is that impacting? So you can see that the paid mode, so most of the time on a 99214, the most common paid code, the common paid amount was $121.36. And that is more than the Medicare allowable. But the problem is that of the 626 times that they billed that code to Meritan, we're just looking at Meritan, they only got paid that amount 101 times. The rest of the time they got paid something different. So they got paid a little more, they got paid a little less. The average was 121, the paid minimum was 27. So you could dive in, again, you have the purple box, you could dive into any one of these categories and get the details of those specific codes, or you could come over to the CPT detail as well. If I come over to the payer report, now I'm going to be looking at individual CPT codes, and I can look at it and see what every payer, so I've filtered on commercial, and this is just going to default to a 99213. I'm going to just switch it to 99214 just because I think that's probably a little more commonly billed. And again, I'm going to go ahead. I like to just keep things kind of consistent. So I'm going to look at the recent 12 months. You could select whatever you wanted in this filter. And now I can see, okay, in the recent 12 months, how am I getting paid on my 99214s? And I could see what my paid mode was, what my Medicare allowable is. And then, again, what the paid average, the paid minimum, and how many times they're paying me to the mode. So that's helpful to know what other payers are paying when you decide you're going to go and renegotiate a contract. It's helpful to know, what other payers are paying you. You could get the payer detail here as well, and then that allowed amount report. If you enter in your contract allowables for all of your individual plans, then we can show you how you're getting paid against those actual contract fees. I know it's really labor intensive to enter in all of those fee schedules. So we don't have a lot of practices that do it or that stay on top of it, but if you do, we can certainly show you how that would work. Before we go over to the rate simulator, I want to show you this charge posting to transaction posting, because this report is going to be the one that shows you from the time you post your charge to the time you get paid, how long does that take? It's going to default, it defaults in alphabetical order. So it's going to default to a transaction type of adjustment, but I'm going to change that to payment because that's what we're looking for. And then over here, I'm going to flip this column to payer primary. And again, I'm going to come up here and I'm just going to look at my commercial payers because that's what we're evaluating today. And then while this is loading, just as a reminder, any of these reports can be taken out to Excel or a PDF down here. And then if you come over here, so now you can take a look at your plans and you can see, okay, what percentage of the time they're getting paid. And this practice is actually pretty good. You're looking at about 80% of the time they're collecting their money and they're getting paid in 15 to 30 days. Now, one thing you want to be aware of is this is going to be, if you see something where it says, okay, just one day, how can you possibly get paid in one day? Those are going to be co-payments, right? Those are going to be co-payments or co-insurance that's been posted to a particular service line. So as I come down through here, though, I could see that, Meritan is doing decent, right? They're right at about 80% of the time getting paid 15 to 30 days. So when you go to negotiate, you can always say, hey, we appreciate the fact that you're paying us in a timely manner, but we still need to see the rates come up a little bit. So you can kind of throw them a little bit of a biscuit there. And then you can see who your problem people are as well, right? Who's paying you, who's taking you 31 to 60 days. You know, that's not a lot of money though. Look at that, it's only $514, or I don't, actually that was just for the day one, but 30% of the time they're taking you, they're taking 31 to 60 days. 19% of the time they're taking 61 to 90 days. So that's really, that's not that good at all. So that's how I could look at, that's how I would look at this report. All right, so we have a few more minutes. I want to go to this rate simulator report. So this is that report where you're going to be able to compare your contracts. So you're going to be able to show Aetna. So like, let's say we're going to look at Meritan, right? So we're going to come over here. We're going to say commercial. And we're going to say, give me just Meritan, because this is who I want to negotiate with. And so maybe your contract was built off of, maybe you signed your contract in 2020. Let's say you signed it in 2020. And at that time, they said, we're going to pay you 125% of the current Medicare fee schedule. And so what you want to show them is that if you keep that percentage in 2025 and you do the same amount of services and you get 125% of Medicare based off of the current year, you know, you're losing, you lost $500. And you know, so, and that's not even taking into account all your increase in expenses, right? Overhead has increased, everything has increased, and you guys are taking less money from your top payers. So you got to really, it's a good detail to go and take notice of how you can negotiate that. And one thing I would mention here is that the RVU unadjusted, so when we're looking at these fee schedules, we're saying that we're going to base this off of your gypsy, but it's going to be unadjusted RVU. So we aren't going to adjust any surgical codes based off of multiple procedures or anything. So how do you use this to go negotiate? So you might say to Meritan, okay, look, in 2020, when we signed our contract and we agreed that we'd get 125% of the Medicare fee schedule, whatever the current Medicare fee schedule was, that was okay. But since then, the conversion factor has gone, you know, has gone up and down. RVUs have changed. And in order for us to at least just break even in 2025 or 2026, we need to get, you know, at least, we'll just say 135. Let's see what that brings up. You know, that gives me an additional $69,000, and that helps cover all of those expenses, right? So maybe you say, I want at least, if we're going to stay on the current Medicare fee schedule, then I want to get at least 135% of Medicare. So hopefully that makes sense. Are there any questions? Okay, I guess there aren't any questions. So that's what we have for you guys today. If you have any questions about these reports or anything that we've done, you know, can you please shoot us an email at support? And by the way, under the support tab, again, this is where the client document libraries, you're gonna find all your key report packets, as well your key report packets for your webinars. Here's where you're gonna find all of our webinars where you can go and watch previous webinars. But if there's anything that we can help you with, if you can go ahead and just email provider client services at intrinsic.com. We'd be happy to help you with that. We do have a short survey that we would really appreciate it if you would fill out at the end of this, just a couple questions. If you complete it at the end of here, we would certainly appreciate that. And outside of that, everyone go and have yourselves a great rest of your day. Thank you all for attending.